There is a man whose face and names hang on many monuments in Nigeria. He is not a saint, neither is he a prophet. He is a soldier. A man who drowned hundreds of his own soldiers in a river he refused to believe could stop him. A man who massacred civilians and personally protected a widow from the same massacre. A man who disobeyed every order given to him and was loved for it. His name was Murtala Muhammed. And in 13 years of military life, he went from chaos incarnate to the most loved leader Nigeria has ever known. To understand Murtala, you must first understand where he came from. Kano, one of the oldest African cities, a place where lineage is everything. On November 8, 1938, in the Kurawa quarters of Kano, a boy was born into one of the city's most prominent families. His grandfather was the Alkalin Kano, the Chief Kwadi of Kano, the highest Islamic judge in the city. His cousin would become Nigeria's defense minister. He was a child born into expectation, and from the very beginning, he refused to be contained by it. He followed the path of northern Nigeria's brightest military minds, attending the prestigious government college in Zaria, now known as Barewa College. Some of his classmates would become generals, governors, and head of states. One of them was Muhammad Shua. Remember that name. He would become both his closest peer and his fiercest rival. In 1959, Murtala began military training at the Regular Officers Special Training School in Teshe, Ghana. And here, history drops its first irony. The man who taught him military laws and tactics, the Oxford-educated officer seconded to the school, was a brilliant young Nigerian named Chukwuemeka Odumegwu Ojukwu, teacher and student. 8 years later, they would face each other across the barrel of a civil war. But that was still to come. From Teshe, Murtala went to Sandhurst, Britain's most elite military academy, alongside men like Ibrahim Haruna, Muhammad Shua, and Ilyasu Bisala. He was commissioned as a second lieutenant in 1961. He was smart, decorated, and connected, and already dangerously sure of himself. Nigeria in 1966 was a country on the edge of a knife. The first military coup had just overthrown the civilian government in January. Major General Johnson Aguiyi-Ironsi, an Igbo officer, was now head of state. And in the barracks of the north, the resentment was building like a fever. Murtala Muhammed, young and fierce, politically connected, and dangerously charismatic, became the emotional engine of what came next. When northern soldiers mutinied against Ironsi in July 1966, it was Murtala's name they rallied behind. Not just because he gave the orders, but because he was the order. He was from the right family, he had the right connections, he had the MPC's blood in his political veins. If the northern military establishment needed a face, Murtala was it. He commanded what one historian called almost mythical loyalty from northern soldiers, and this was the moment. And then came the war. May 1967, when the eastern region seceded and declared itself the Republic of Biafra, Nigeria's federal government under General Yakubu Gowon ordered a military response. What was supposed to be a quick police action became a catastrophic grinding civil war. Biafra made a lightning strike into the Midwest region. The Federal Army was stunned, and Gowon turned to the one man capable of organized fury, Murtala Muhammed. He was appointed GOC of the newly formed 2nd Division. There was just one problem. The division didn't exist yet. Murtala built it from nothing. He commandeered vehicles meant for other divisions It drafted soldiers from other units, sometimes mid-missions. It pulled Lieutenant Shehu Musa Yaradua straight from the 3rd Division while the young man was running an errand. Amongst those swept into his orbit were Sani Abacha, Alani Akinrinade, and Oladipo Diya, future generals and future heads of state. All of them at once, just men trying to keep up with Murtala's pace. Within weeks, Murtala's improvised army drove the Biafran out of the Midwest in a blistering counter-offensive. Part brilliance, part the enemy's own disorganization, but the result was undeniable. The Midwest was retaken. And then the victory turned dark. What happened next in the Midwest remains one of the most painful chapters of the Nigerian Civil War. Hundreds of Igbo civilians accused of sympathizing with Biafra were summarily executed by soldiers of the 2nd Division. The massacre was so extreme that years later, General Gowon publicly apologized for them. One officer who served under Murtala alleged that he personally ordered the summary execution of Biafran prisoners of war. And yet, in the same chaos, Murtala personally ensured that the murder of Major Nzeogu, one of the January coup plotters, was found protected and not armed. This was Murtala Muhammed in one frame, the fire that burns the village and the hand that puts one person from the flame. After retaking the Midwest, Murtala set his eyes on the prize, Onitsha, one of Biafra's most strategically vital cities, sitting on the eastern bank of the Niger River. To take Onitsha was to break Biafra's spine. There were 2 ways to attack. Option A, a direct river crossing, dangerous, exposed, and against every rule of military doctrine. Option B, cross unopposed through territory held by the neighboring 1st Division, then advance overland. Army headquarters recommended option B. Everyone agreed on option B. Everyone except one man. You see, to take option B meant advancing through territory commanded by Colonel Muhammed Shua, his classmate from Barewa College, remember, his classmates from Sandhurst, now his rival. Murtala would not do it. He would rather drown than ask Shua for safe passage. His own brigade commander, Lieutenant Colonel Frank Aisida, was so convinced that the river crossing would fail that he asked permission to write a final letter to his wife before it began. He refused to participate. Murtala did not flinch. His navigational instruments were broken. The river was swollen. He had no reconnaissance of the other side. Most of his troops were not trained combatants. Most of them could not swim. And it was also believed by some that he consulted his religious soothsayers, who told him the river crossing would succeed. He launched across anyway. Waiting for them on the other side was Colonel Joe Hannibal Achuzia, arguably the most feared Biafran field commander of the entire war. The crossing was a massacre. Federal troops were cut down in the water. Men drowned under the weight of their equipment and the weight of Biafran fire. Among the lucky ones who made it back to shore were Lieutenant Shehu Musa Yaradua and Oladipo Diya. He tried again, he failed, and then he tried a 3rd time. He failed again. His supposed soothsayers had promised him victory. His men had given everything they had, and the river had taken it all. After 3 catastrophic failures and devastating losses, Murtala Muhammed did something almost impossible for a man like him. He swallowed his pride. He accepted the original plan. He crossed through the 1st Division territory without even telling Shua he was coming, and finally captured Onitsha. The victory was real, but the cost had been staggering, and it wasn't over yet. Near Abagana, Murtala authorized the movement of a massive supply convoy, nearly 100 vehicles, along a narrow road with no room to turn or room to reverse. A lone Biafran soldier, perhaps disobeying his own officers' orders, fired the last mortar his unit possessed. A desperate, almost reckless shot. It was a direct hit. The convoy erupted in flames. A single improbable shot igniting one of the most spectacular Biafran victories of the entire war, because Murtala had put them all in one road with no way out. Murtala was recalled. His division was in ruins. Some of his men began looting towns, harassing civilians, fraudulently collecting the pay of dead soldiers. Two commanders would follow him before order was finally restored. Nigeria survived this war, but it did not heal. The Gowon government, bloated with oil money and paralyzed by its own corruption, was squandering the nation. Cement scandals, abandoned projects, a government that had simply stopped governing. And in the background, watching, calculating, disgusted, was a brigadier who had never lost his fury.
Fellow Nigerians, events of the past few years have indicated.
And on July 29, 1975, Murtala Muhammed seized power in a bloodless coup while Gowon was at an OAU summit in Uganda. And something extraordinary happened. Nigerians celebrated, not with the cautious relief that usually greets a military takeover, but with joy. Because what came next was unlike anything Nigeria had ever seen from a military ruler. Murtala moved with the same ferocious, unstoppable energy that had defined him on the battlefield. He purged corrupt officials, 10,000 civil servants dismissed in one sweeping action. He confronted foreign powers, publicly rejecting American interference in African affairs at the OAU, drawing a standing ovation from the entire continent. He set a date for democracy, committing Nigeria to a return to civilian rule. He decentralized power, creating new states, moving the capital from Lagos to Abuja, breaking the stranglehold of old power centers. And he did all this in 6 months. He abolished the long-standing culture of sycophancy around the Nigerian leadership and civil service. He dismissed top officials, military governors, civil servants, judges by name on the national radio without ceremony. He walked into government offices unannounced. He was known to fire ministers in the same breath as greeting them. The man who had drowned soldiers in the Niger River was now somehow drowning corruption in the machinery of government with the same reckless, unstoppable force. The people who had mourned the dead of the Midwest looked at what he was building and felt something they hadn't felt in years: hope. His past errors did not disappear, but what he was doing with the present was writing over them, not erasing them, but burying them under something larger. He was no longer the general who had failed at Onitsha. He did not believe in heavy security. He thought it created distance between a leader and his people. It was a very Murtala thing to think. At Dodan Barracks Road, a failed coup attempt ambushed his motorcade. Murtala Muhammed, the Hillman Storm, was shot and killed. He had just been in power for 201 days. Nigeria named its international airports after him. His face is on the 20 naira currency. Several monuments, streets, and standing structures were named after him. He drowned men in that river. He massacred civilians in the Midwest. He disobeyed every order given to him when it suited him. And yet, when Nigerians think of what any of their leaders could be, they think of him. Not because they've forgotten what he did wrong, but because what he did right in 201 days felt like a nation finally breathing. But this story doesn't end here, because Murtala Muhammed was not the beginning of Nigeria's military story, and it was certainly not the end. What came after him would shape Nigeria in ways he could not even control. More coups, more power struggles, and more storm. Follow this page, like and subscribe, because the next chapter is the continuation of our series on the rise of Nigeria's military coup tradition, the very one that took Murtala out of office.